Good morning, everyone. We are in Mishna Yischala, Perek Dalet, Chapter 4, Mishna Yud, Mishna 10. I'd like to dedicate this morning's learning in memory of my mother, Mr. Shalamis Rabinowitz, Shalamis Bas, Rabbi Yaakov Eliezer. The previous Mishnah was discussing about how to deal with separating Challah in Eretz Yisrael, outside of Eretz Yisrael. And now this Mishnah is going to talk about Challah that was brought from outside of Eretz Yisrael into Eretz Yisrael. Nitai ish Tekoa. Nitai, name of a man, who lived in a city called Tekoa. Hevi Chalois mi Beisar. He brought Chalas from Beisar. The Kiblu mi Banu, they did not accept it from him. So the story here is, this man Nitai lived in a place called Tekoa, which is part of Eretz Yisrael. He went to a place called Beisar. Now, Beisar is a city outside of Eretz Yisrael, and therefore it is not the Beitar that we are familiar with that is a city in Eretz Yisrael. So he brought these chals from outside of Eretz Yisrael to distribute to the Kohanim in Tekoa. But the sages did not allow them to accept it from him. What was the issue? The issue is as I've been discussing until now, that the challah that comes from outside of Eretz Yisrael, from Chutz La'aretz, from outside of Eretz Yisrael, is tamid, it's impure, because the sages decreed on outside of Eretz Yisrael that just automatically going there makes you tamid. So any challah that is separated there automatically becomes tamid. It can't be eaten. So therefore, step number one was that the challah that he brought from outside of Eretz Yisrael to Eretz Yisrael was tamid. All right. But he can still now, the halacha is, says they didn't accept it from him. So that means they did not do with this challah what you would regularly do. Now, regularly when you have challah that's tamei, the halacha is, what do? You burn it. That's the halacha. Challah that's tamei, the kohen can't eat it, you burn it. But here, that's not what happened. They didn't let him burn it. The reason they let him burn it right now is because of the fact that people did not necessarily know that people would not necessarily know that this challah came from outside of Eretz Yisrael and was tamei, and they would think that he had this good challah and he's burning it, which you're not allowed to burn challah if it's not tamei, and therefore he couldn't distribute it, he couldn't burn it. How about sending it back? Couldn't do that either. The reason for that was because, again, the sages were concerned that, again, since people may not know that this challah is tamei because it came from outside of Eretz Yisrael, they're going to think that it's okay to send the challah of Eretz Yisrael outside of Eretz Yisrael, which you can't do that either, because if you have challah in Eretz Yisrael that's pure and you send it to outside of Eretz Yisrael, it's going to become impure by going outside of Eretz Yisrael. And you're not allowed to make challah tamei. So really, this person was stuck. What was he going to do? And at the end of the day, the Bartanura says what they told him to do was hold on to it and burn it with the chametz. Because if he's burning it with the chametz, then people don't necessarily know why he's burning it. He's burning because it's time to burn. It's time to burn chametz. And therefore, that was the only solution for this person. Next, a similar example, Anshe Alexandria, the people of Alexandria, which there actually was more than one. There was one in Egypt and there was one on the coast of Syria. Whichever one it was from outside of Eretz Yisrael. So the people of Alexandria, they brought their challah portions, what they had separated for challah. They brought it from Alexandria, hoping to distribute in Eretz Yisrael to the Kohanim. And again, they didn't accept it from them because of the reasons we said before. Okay, so that's challah. Now we have another example of where something was rejected by the sages. Nothing to do with challah, different case. Anshe Har Tzavoyim, the people who lived in the area called Har Tzavoyim, Mount Tzavoyim, which was in Eretz Yisrael. Heviu Bikureim Kaidem Atzeres. They brought their Bikurim to the Beis HaMikdash before Shavuos. There is a mitzvah of Bikurim that the first ripened fruits, we separate them and they bring them to the Beis HaMikdash. And this happens Shavuos time. That happens on the holiday of Shavuos. You bring them on Shavuos, and after there's a certain point of time that not everybody can bring it on Shavuos, but it starts from Shavuos time. And we bring the fruits to the Beis HaMikdash in a basket. They give it to the Kohen. The Kohen puts it down in front of the Mizbeach, in front of the altar. The person bringing it makes a special declaration of thanks to Hashem, and then it's distributed amongst the Kohanim. Now, it's supposed to be brought, the mitzvah starts from Shavuos. These people brought it from Shavuos, before Shavuos. The Kibbutz Mayhem, but again, they would not accept it from them. Why? Now, number one, if it would have been from outside of Eretz Yisrael, there would have been no mitzvah bikurim. But that's not the situation here. Harah Tzavoim was in Eretz Yisrael. The problem is that they brought it too early. Because of that which is written in the Torah, the Chag HaKotzir and the festival of harvest, which is Shavuos, Bikurei Maasecha, the first of your labor, Asher Tizra Basada, that you shall plant in the field. Now, this pasuk is not just talking about, it's talking about actually not only the Bikurim themselves, but actually Bikurei Maasecha, Chag HaKotzir Bikurei Maasecha, the first of your works, actually is referring to a special sacrifice that's brought on Shavuos. On Shavuos, there was a sacrifice called the Shtei Halechem. It was considered a meal offering. It was 2 breads. And it was 2 breads from the new wheat. Now, when it came to everybody else eating the new wheat, the second day of Pesach, when the Omer sacrifice was brought, and that was made from barley, that allowed people to eat from the new grains. But new grains could not be used in the Beis Hamikdash for the meal offerings until this Shtei Halechem, until these 2 loaves of wheat bread were brought in the Beis Hamikdash on Shavuos, and that allowed all other produce to be brought to the Beis Hamikdash for the purposes of the avodah, for the purpose of the divine worship. And therefore, and now that's what the pasuk is talking about. The pasuk says, "V'chag HaKotzir," the festival of Shavuos, the first of your work. The first of your work refers to the Shtei Halechem, the 2 loaves of bread. They're the first of your work. Before you'll be able to do anything more with produce in the Beis Hamikdash, the pasuk is telling us you must offer these first. Therefore, if these have to be the first of the offerings of new produce in the Beis Hamikdash, that means you can't bring bikurim before them. And that's what happened here. People from Harah Tzavoim, they brought their bikurim before Shavuos, which means before the Shtei Halechem, the 2 loaves were offered, and therefore it's too early for them to come. No produce can come into the Beis Hamikdash for any kind of divine worship until the Shtei Halechem, until these 2 loaves of bread were offered. Therefore, they brought the bikurim, they didn't accept it from them, and they told them they have to bring it back. They have to bring it back on Shavuos. We continue in the Chafetz Chaim. Now, before we start the next, before we move forward, it's important to know that the Chafetz Chaim, that's this work here, Chafetz Chaim. This is a compilation of the laws of what we refer to Lashon Harah, written by Rabbi Yisrael Meir Kagan, known as the Chafetz Chaim. And he put together this work that he called Chafetz Chaim on the laws of Lashon Harah. Now, the term Lashon Harah is a generic term that we use when you speak badly about someone. Technically, the generic Lashon Harah has 2 parts to it, or 2 kinds to it, which the Chafetz Chaim divides his work into. There's Hilchas Lashon Harah, the laws of Lashon Harah, which in that context means when you tell someone, when you speak negatively about someone, you say to someone, so-and-so did this. It's not relevant to the person who's being spoken to. Reuben is telling Shimon what Levi did wrong, or whatever derogatory statements about Levi. There's nothing personal with Shimon involved. The next type of Lashon Harah is called Rechilus. Rechilus, in action with the Torah's prohibition about speaking Lashon Harah is Loselech Rachel. Do not go as a peddler, meaning as a peddler of gossip. But in technically Rechilus refers to a type of Lashon Harah where you tell someone, Reuben tells Shimon what Levi did to him, which is what the Chafetz Chaim is going to speak out. Okay, that is what Rechilus is. So we're starting now the second half of the Chafetz Chaim that he calls Hilchas Isur Rechilus, the laws of the prohibitions of speaking Rechilus. A lot of it is going to be repetitive, but he divides it into 2 portions, into 2 parts. So Sif Aleph, we're in Klal Aleph, Sif Aleph, chapter 1, paragraph 1. Hamarago b'chaveroi. We're going to use a word right now, one who informs on his friend. Doesn't mean usually we use the word informer, means to the government. But here it means you inform on your friend. You inform on your friend to some. You inform on Shimon to Reuven. Okay, I'll have to go say Reuven informs on Levi to Shimon. One informs on his friend transgresses a prohibition. Shenemar, as it states, do not go as a peddler amongst your people. This is a very great sin. We found that many people were killed because of this, because a person informed on someone else. Therefore, shortly after, right next to the Torah's prohibition, don't go around as a peddler of gossip. Right after that, the Torah says, don't stand by the blood of your friend. The connect mean the Torah juxtaposes these two prohibitions to say there's a connection. One can bring to the other. Meaning, don't speak Lashon Harah so as not to stand by the blood of your friend. Because if you do speak Lashon Harah, you could be causing blood to be spilled. Tzei ulamad, go out and learn. I mean, come see, I'll give you an example, says the Chavetz Chaim. What happened from the Rechilas of Doeg Hadomi? When David HaMelech, when King David had to run away from Shaul HaMelech, King Saul, because he wanted to kill him, so David HaMelech was taken into a city called Nov. It was actually a city of Kohanim. And a man named Doeg Hadomi informed on the people of Nov for harboring David to Shaul. And what happened? The entire city of Kohanim were killed because of it. Because in the eyes of Shaul, they were harboring a rebel against the kingdom, and which made them liable to be killed. But it all happened because of Doeg informing on them. And this prohibition that we have written, so the Torah writes explicitly regarding this. Do not go around speaking rechilas. But the truth is that besides for the specific transgression of when you speak rechilas, there are a number of other transgressions or positive commandments you disobey when doing so, as the Chavetz Chaim wrote about in his introduction. So now, based paragraph 2. What is a rachel? He carries words or matters from one person to another. And he goes and he says, so-and-so said this about you. So-and-so did this to you. I heard he did this to you. Or he wants to do to you. So basically, you are telling someone what someone else, how someone else wants to harm them or has harmed them. And by doing so when you and Reuven tells Shimon what Levi said about him, then that is what now puts Levi down in the eyes of Shimon. Shimon now actually dislikes Levi for it. Even though it could very well be that essentially what is being said about what Levi did to Shimon, even the person telling it is not saying it as something derogatory. And if they'd ask Levi, did you do it? He would say, sure. Either because he's right, or whatever he did, he had a different intention than the way it could have come across to Levi. Nonetheless, if this is something that Levi perceives as hurting him, so now by telling him what Shimon did, mixing up the characters. If at the end of the day, what you said about what Levi said or did to Shimon, right? If Shimon perceives that as hurting him, then that's rechilas. Because you told Shimon what Levi did to him that Shimon perceives as hurting him, that now creates a dislike in Shimon to Levi, and therefore that's called speaking rechilas. Have a wonderful day.